or else are missing and presumed dead. Over the last 30 years, an estimated average of 88 journalists have been killed each year worldwide, a staggering number. In the last 3 months, however, since October 7, 2023, in a tiny strip of land in the Middle East, a current total of 109 journalists have been murdered by Israel with targeted airstrikes or sniper attack. Families of journalists murdered in their homes by targeted airstrikes. Israel's deliberate targeting of journalists, as well as the cutting off of electricity and internet connection and the silencing of dissident journalists in the West, aims to prevent the truth from being witnessed by the outside world. But through the camera lens and smartphone recordings of some of the bravest journalists in the world, the citizens of Gaza, the world has been able to witness in real time uncut scenes that are so horrific they might have been unfathomable had we not witnessed it with our own eyes. Millions of people worldwide have taken to the streets every single weekend for the past 14 weeks to demand an immediate ceasefire and an end to the atrocities in Gaza. The crimes being committed by Israel blatantly defy international law and are in fact consistent with genocide. Yet our political leaders in this lucky country, a nation that itself was built on the genocide against First Nations peoples, have stood aside and allowed these atrocities to continue. On Thursday, South Africa stood before the International Court of Justice, backed by the 57-member Organisation of Islamic Countries, as well as Jordan, Turkey, Malaysia, Bolivia, the Maldives, Namibia, Pakistan, Colombia, Brazil, and the 22-member Arab League, in its landmark case charging Israel with genocide against the Palestinian people. Despite our obligations as a signatory to the Genocide Convention to prevent and punish genocide, Australia remains silent on its position. Meanwhile, our PM announced yesterday that Australia and the UK are supporting the US as it launched more than a dozen airstrikes on Yemen in retaliation for the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea on cargo ships conducting trade with Israel in an attempt to intervene on Israel's continued slaughter of the citizens of Gaza. As the US war machine drags us into yet another of its conflicts, the man who stood up to the corruption of the warmongering US empire, our most famous and revered award-winning journalist, Julian Assange, remains behind bars in Belmarsh prison, awaiting his final appeal next month, while his prospective extradition to the US looms large. Julian has been arbitrarily detained since 2010 and now detained in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison for the last 4 years. If extradited to the United States, Julian, an Australian citizen, will be charged with espionage under American law and will be kept behind bars under even harsher conditions for the rest of his life. If the US is successful with his extradition, this sets a frightening precedent that will impact journalists everywhere, ensuring that they may be extradited to another country to be charged under the laws of that country. Julian's only crime was publishing the truth, exposing horrendous crimes being committed by US soldiers against civilians in Iraq. Likewise, David McBride, ex-soldier, military lawyer and whistleblower, may face a lifetime behind bars for leaking the documents that led to the Afghan files, exposing war crimes committed by our own Australian soldiers against innocent civilians in Afghanistan. Journalists and whistleblowers are punished, while those committing crimes against humanity are protected with impunity by the system that profits. Meanwhile, we are fed an artfully prescribed narrative, parroted word for word by a compliant mainstream media. The silencing of journalists is a frightening phenomenon in a time where we stand on the brink of a full-scale war, escalated by warmongering empires with a collective agenda. Now more than ever, we must stand with those who are brave enough to speak the truth. We must amplify the voices of those who must be heard. We must stand with South Africa in holding Israel to account, and we must demand that our government do the same, that our government represents its people and not the interests of America and its war machine. And we must continue to demand an end to the atrocities being committed against the people of Palestine and an end to the occupation. Free the truth. Free, free Palestine.